Hi. Today's history story is from Princesses Behaving Badly, and it is the story of Hatshepsut, the princess who ruled Egypt as a king. She ruled ancient Egypt. She lived from about 1508 to 1458 BC. Hatshepsut must have known a thing or two about public relations. How else could an overweight, balding, middle-aged princess transform herself into a svelte, athletic, divinely conceived king? It's lucky that the men who tried to chisel her from history didn't do a very good job. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't know anything about ancient Egypt's most successful and longest-serving female ruler, one of only 3 women in as many millennia to seize the title and power of pharaoh. Hatshepsut was born during the New Kingdom period, ancient Egypt's Golden Age. She was the eldest daughter of the 18th dynasty ruler Thutmose I, a great military leader, and his consort, Queen Ahmose. According to her own, probably less than honest claims, Hatshepsut was her father's favorite child, and the person he wanted to ascend the throne after his death. Unfortunately for her, Dad didn't make his wishes explicit. So, when he died, a prince was located among the sons born to the women of the pharaoh's harem. The leading candidate was Prince Thutmose, the son of a minor concubine, who was willing to marry Hatshepsut, his half-sister, to solidify his claim to the throne. Unchallenged, he became Thutmose II, with his wife/half-sister became queen. But Thutmose II died unexpectedly only 3 years later. Modern-day CT scans of his remains indicate the cause was heart disease. Once again, a dynastic struggle loomed. Hatshepsut had born only a girl, so another prince from the mistress pack was pushed forward. Though just a baby, Thutmose III became the new pharaoh. Hatshepsut, now Dowager Queen, stepped in to rule as regent until the boy, technically her stepson and nephew, mind you, was old enough to assume power. This was pretty much standard procedure in Egypt at the time. Mothers often ruled in place of their infant sons, and wives took over while their husbands were at war. For about 2 years, Hatshepsut ruled as a dutiful regent, recognizing Thutmose III as pharaoh. Then, something strange happened. Hatshepsut shoved aside the toddler pharaoh and crowned herself king. Boldly naming herself king required more than a little cunning to pull off. It was a move that took balls, literally, because divine order required that a pharaoh be male. So how did she do it? With a 3-pronged strategy. First, Hatshepsut claimed that her father had appointed her as his successor, which also reinforced the idea that she was the result of a true blue-blooded union, not just the random offspring of a minor concubine. Second, Hatshepsut claimed that she was conceived when Amun, the pharaoh of all the gods, had disguised himself as her father and had sex with her mother. Hatshepsut began referring to herself as God's wife of Amun, which didn't entirely make sense, but does imply that she was really royal and the daughter-wife of the godliest of gods. Her final, and perhaps most politically astute move, was to kick out all existing courtiers, and then to stock the palace with supporters beholden to her. Hatshepsut kept plenty busy outside the palace walls as well, embarking on a prodigious propaganda campaign. To cement her image as pharaoh, She was often depicted as a man. In official carvings and statues, she was shown with the slim, athletic, masculine build of the ideal ruler, wearing a cobra-shaped headdress and false beard, both pharaonic attributes. Of seemingly no consequence was that by this time she was well on her way to becoming a portly, middle-aged woman cursed with the familial overbite and huge pendulous breasts, so say the archaeologists who found her mummy. Hatshepsut's reign was remarkable, an era marked by prosperity and peace. Foremost among her accomplishments was re-establishing trade networks with neighboring kingdoms. Her focus was clearly on enrichment rather than expansion. Though she did enjoy some early martial success, she ordered her armies to embark on lucrative trading expeditions rather than mounting costly and risky military campaigns. Hatshepsut also spent some of Egypt's significant wealth on an ambitious architectural binge. She put her subjects to work constructing massive obelisks, built or renovated temples throughout the kingdom, and commissioned hundreds of statues of herself, all so that posterity would remember her well, as she had written on an obelisk in Karnak. Now my heart turns this way and that, as I think what the people will say. Those who see my monuments in years to come, and who shall speak of what I have done. Which is really rather ironic, not to mention sad, given what happens next. Hatshepsut died, apparently from complications from diabetes, about 1458 BC, which meant it was finally time for the rightful ruler, Thutmosis III, to take over. Thutmosis III, now in his mid-20s, was more than ready to rock. He proved himself to be a skilled and acquisitive military commander. He led 17 campaigns into the region we now call the Middle East. One of his most notable victories is still taught in military academies today. When his own successful reign began to draw to a close, the aging Thutmosis III decided to wage another sort of war. The eradication of any trace of his aunt/stepmother's reign. He had stonemasons chisel her name off many monuments, cover the text on her obelisks with stone, knock down or deface her statues, and destroy painted images of her. She was even left off the official lists of Egyptian pharaohs. And it worked, at least for a couple of millennia. Though Hatshepsut was briefly mentioned in a biography of Egyptian kings written in 300 BC, it wasn't until 1822, when hieroglyphics were first deciphered, that anyone had a clue she had ever ruled. So why did Thutmosis III attempt to erase Hatshepsut from history? At first glance, his efforts look like more than mere spite. Ancient Egyptian culture worshipped death, or, to put it more accurately, life after death, hence the obsession with mummification. They believed that a person's spirit could survive if enough images of that person were left behind. So, chiseling Hatshepsut's name off the walls and eradicating her image from statues was more than just a symbolic effort to get rid of her memory. It was an attempt to make sure she stayed dead. Or maybe not. Egyptologists have long been divided on just how Thutmosis III really felt about Hatshepsut. On the one hand, she had ruled in his place, and he reacted by destroying or claiming everything she'd ever made. Which helps explains why earlier historians felt obliged to cast her as the wicked stepmother, declaring her, quote, vain, ambitious, and unscrupulous, and of a most virile character, end quote. On the other hand, consider that Hatshepsut didn't have Thutmose III killed, which was certainly an option, and instead of hiding him away, she allowed him to receive military training. That was a potentially dangerous decision because it could easily have allowed him to amass loyal followers and gain strength to back up his right to rule. Thutmose also seems to have held his stepmother aunt in some regard. He didn't destroy her body, which would have been the logical place to start if he had really wanted to sabotage her afterlife. Moreover, his revisionist efforts didn't begin until decades after her death, meaning that he either had a very long, simmering resentment or other reasons altogether. Modern Egyptologists believe that Thutmose acted not out of anger or resentment, but rather political expediency. By all accounts, a rational, clear-headed ruler, Thutmose III simply wanted to subsume Hatshepsut's glorious reign into his own. That's why he left untouched certain images of her as queen regent. Thutmose was probably also worried about the succession of his son, Amenhotep II. Rewriting history was one way of discouraging rival claims to the throne and ensuring that Thutmose's line remained in charge. Even if Thutmose's attack on Hatshepsut's memory was nothing personal, it was something of a fatal blow. It has taken more than 150 years to piece together a satisfying biography of the princess who became pharaoh, and the gaps still puzzle and confound. Fortunately, Thutmose's crew of statue chiselers didn't get everything. One of the 3 sarcophagi Hatshepsut made for herself was unearthed in 1903. It was empty, and the stones that covered the inscriptions on her obelisks had helped preserve them. Hatshepsut's mummy was found in the early part of the 20th century. It had been unceremoniously dumped on the floor of an obscure tomb in the Valley of the Kings and robbed of its jewelry by looters. For more than 2 decades, archaeologists were unable to connect this sad pile of bones, bereft of golden afterlife accessories, to the woman who had ruled Egypt. It wasn't until 2007 that scientists were able to definitively claim that this was the body of the mysterious female pharaoh. Still, the discovery of her mummy can't explain why Hatshepsut did what she did, why she shoved aside the rightful ruler, crowned herself pharaoh, and embarked on a prodigious campaign of propaganda to legitimize her claim. Dynastic crisis, a thirst for power, political wrangling, a need to assert authority, a hunger for glory. All are possibilities that historians have batted around. None are truly satisfying. At the end of the day, all we really know is that Hatshepsut was a remarkable woman, one who assumed supreme executive power and did so without apology. Thanks for listening.